computer. Okay. Right. Last week we discussed Get Muktam in the context of Zman. Just to remind you, I told you that in the context of the Machloket Rabbi Victor and Kanir Zarua. So one of the proofs was Zman. We're going to get to that today. Today is the final part of the Zman discussion. So in that context, we began discussing the issue of Zman. And the question of Zman and Gittin, what we discovered right away was that there's, just to remind you, there's a Mishnah on Pevav. It says that Zman is only the Torah Durabanan. We had a machloket, the first class that we discussed Zman. We did a machloket whether that's only according to the Masir Karti, also the Fatima Karti. But either way, the Gemara there says that again, an Ein Bo Zman would be effective, at least in some way, midoraita. We had it through a machloket, Ran, Tosfot, Rashi, I think, I don't remember whom, about the extent to which, we undermine the get Ein Bo Zman. Is it only if they're kids? Is it only if they're married? Or doesn't make a difference, any of those things, right? Those are the three options. That being said, we discussed the extent to which, in the second class, I think we discussed the extent to which the Ein Bo Zman would be relevant. In other words, we talked about, why is it get Ein Bo Zman? Why is Zman necessary? And then we had Peyrod, or we had Yechapa Bat Achoto, right? Yes, I am. Thank you. So Shem Yechapa Bat Achoto, and then we spent some time discussing the extent to which those are relevant factors, even after you have Zman, or if you can get around this Zman. For example, let's say you had Zman and then you cut it out, right? Or let's say this Zman, we talked about the inaccurate Zman, and that we talked about in two variations. One in the variation of the, what if it's the Shemitah cycle, right? You remember that was a question in the Gemara. So there's Zman is not really going to pin you down, but then as Michael pointed out, every day something could happen between 9 a.m. and noon. So we asked ourselves the question: to what extent is this Zman a relevant factor? Is it a check off, or is it right? No, it's once you checked it off, so then you can move beyond that thing. So we got a Zman, we got an accurate Zman, an inaccurate Zman. And we even talked about the case of when you send from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, right, where this Zman isn't going to be accurate because it's 6 months. It takes 6 months to get there. So that was what those were the discussions about, to the extent to which it impacts. Then we spent last week talking about the get muktam, right? Again, a get muktam where you predate the get before giving it. And we noted there's a machloket, Rambam and other Rishonim about a get muktam, and we also know the Rabbi Shimon's Shita right at the very end in the Mishnah. The Rabbi Shimon says that every place else a get muktam isn't good except for Gittin, where a get muktam is good. We talked about why does that undermine the chefs of the get? Is it something else? Today I want to talk about the flip side, right? Which we actually met in the Rambam, but we didn't really discuss too much. So I want to begin by discussing get Meuchar, or it's a get where in other words, you have this Zman, but instead of having the Zman early or the Zman on the time, you have the Zman later, meaning you give the get today, but it says on the get that you're only going to be divorced. So the get is signed and delivered, right? Signed, sealed, and delivered today on the 8th of Adar, the 9th of Adar, I guess. But the date on the get, when you look at the get, it says the 20th of Adar. So would such a get work? And not only would such a get work, but to what extent is that indicative of something significant that's going on in Gittin? And then so that's going to be the first 35 minutes of the class. And in the last 15-20 minutes, we'll go back to Rabbi Victor and the Zarua. And with that, we'll complete our discussion of Zman. And then next week, we'll move on. Okay, so first thing to note is if I just ask you in general, right, before you knew anything, if I ask you, what about a shtar meuchar, what would you say? I give you a thing that says, I owe you money, and I owe you money from 5 days from now. Why would it be fine?
Because I can, the same way when I rent a house, I can give them 12 post-dated checks that says I agree to pay you 100 shekels every month. Here are my checks, so that you can get.
Right, and how does it affect the lakuchot? In other words, the people who, again, remember, what are we always concerned about? We're always concerned when I have a loan, and then, right, so again, I lent you money, right, that you can't give back, and you'll sell it to somebody else, and in principle, I could collect it. So if I agree that I'm only going to be able to collect it from a certain day, right, then, okay, you can go sell your property because I only agree that I would collect it after that. So if you collected it between now and then, that should be okay. Okay, and we do have a Mishnah in Masachet Shvid. Oh, sorry, I'm not on the screen yet. Sure, I can pull it up here.
Go the other way.
I'm in the wrong. Why can't I pull it up here? 1 second, Danny. I'm sorry. Danny, I hope you're feeling better.
Almost there.
Okay. Hashem. So I'm gonna get back to Zoom here. Sorry. Okay, so it's doing everything but being willing to share. Okay, there we go. I'm just gonna make it bigger for you, Danny.
Thank you.
So the Mishnah Masachet Shvid talking about pruzbol. Remember what happens in a pruzbol? I read a shtar that says I'm giving over all my shtar to the Beit Din. So pruzbol hamuktam kasher. If I give it back, in other words, I gave it to the Beit Din, let's say erev, the end of Shemitah, or the beginning of Shemitah. Let's say it's the Machloka Rishonim. When you give a pruzbol, let's assume it's the end of Shemitah. You give it to them the day before, and you predated 6 months. That's okay. Hameuchar pasul, right? In other words, if I dated it later, it's pasul. So this sounds to go exactly like you'd be happy to do. Why is a pruzbol Meuchar not good? Because you want to have your pruzbol, you want to give your shtar out over to the Beit Din before Shemitah ends, right?
It doesn't do the task.
Right.
In other words, here it's the opposite because I could take out a shtar the day after I sign the pruzbol. But if it's not for 6 months, then now I just added a shtar.
Another loan. Okay, fine. Okay. What about so in general, there's a Gemara in Baba Batra that talks about this as well. The Gemara talks about it in a very different context. I don't really want to go into this Gemara, but the Gemara says, right? The Gemara has a different context. You know, I'm not even going to go into the Gemara in Baba Batra. It's not germane to our discussion enough. Okay, but the main source for today that we need to discuss is the Rambam. Okay, so this is where much of our focus is going to be, and the question is, what's the debate here? So the Rambam does something interesting. The Rambam says when it comes to Gittin, right? Get sheyesh alav eidim ve'ein bo zman. Okay, that should sound familiar already. That's the Mishnah Bevav, right? Or shaya muktam o meuchar. So the Rambam puts muktam and meuchar together when it comes to get. Shenechtav bayom v'nechtam balayla. That's our Gemara, right? It was written in the day and signed at night. Shlach harav. We discussed that last week, even if you're discussing the same topic. Katav taget b'Yushalayim v'tav katav belod. Right, this should sound familiar because we read it last week when it came to the muktam, but I just skipped over the meuchar part. If you wrote it in Jerusalem, but it says right, we know it was written delivered in Jerusalem, but it says it was done in Lod. Kol elu psulim ad shiachtamu bo bazman ktivato uvemakom ktivato. In other words, you have to have accuracy when it comes to the time, and you have to have accuracy when it comes to the place. So the Rambam here does something interesting. It's notwithstanding our discussion about, in general, shtarei chov mukdamim or meucharim, right? Mukdamim being psulim and meucharim being sherim. The Rambam paskins that a get meuchar is pasul midorabana.
Because it's not zman.
Because it has the wrong zman. Right? It has the wrong zman. In other words, you need a get with zman. And just like a get without zman would be pasul midorabana, but if they got married, we'll live with it. So same thing here. A get that has the wrong zman, whether it's mukdam or meuchar, would be a problem. Would be the same problem. The challenge becomes, Jeff, that do we have the reason we wanted zman was because shami chapel bakadachot or peiros, and seemingly those aren't issues when it comes to a get meuchar. Why
wouldn't be the payroll be? Why they have this extra gap of time?
Because think about it. What happens in the payroll? What are we concerned about? That the woman in a get she'ein bo zman, what's going to happen? Let's go. I'm just going to play it out, okay? Yeah, the get has no zman, so the husband is able to eat payroll all the zman that they're married, right? And there's no zman, so he just keeps on eating payroll. He gives her the get, and he just keeps on eating payroll until she sues him. And then he says, "Oh, that only happened yesterday." She pulls out the get. He says, "Okay, from today I'll stop eating payroll because I see you have a get." Right? Would that happen in a shtar meuchar? Well, what's a shtar meuchar? A shtar meuchar again, right? It says 3 months from now.
I know I can eat payroll until
exactly. In other words, in principle, there's no payroll there because the get, which she accepted a get that it said 3 months from now. So I guess he's allowed to continue eating payroll until 3 months from now. So,
because that's same thing.
And the same thing with the niece. In other words, what are we afraid of? That she's going to commit adultery and he's going to predate the shtar. But here there's no predating, it's post-dating. So, right? In other words, it shouldn't be. No. One second. Did I say that?
He can't claim that she was divorced earlier because the date shows.
Right. Correct. He won't be able to show them. So either the batachoto or the payroll shouldn't be a problem.
Well, why can't it just be considered the Rambam's view that you just have all the
right. So one possibility to explain the Rambam is once the Gemara, it's a V. This is the V going the other direction. You need a date, right? So until now we said you need a date. We don't care what happens later on. Cut it out. I don't care, right? Because right here it would be, right? So there I guess it would be like a Mekel option. Here it would be a Machmir option that a get without get Meuchar, right? And
it's the wrong date.
Because it's the wrong date, even though it's later. In other words, the point is that if you have, we said, in other words, if you have a get and then you cut out the date, so there's still going to be a Shema Yachapel Batachoto problem. There's still going to be a payword problem later on, right? Which she has an adulterous relationship, and then he says, "Oh, the get happens really earlier, and there's no getting the get anymore." And we said, "Oh, the people say it's mutter, right? That machok in the Gemara." So they say, "Well, you just need a V, right?" That already you've gotten rid of it, right? So in that case, in the case where you cut it out, it ends up being a kula.
Yeah.
Right. In this case, the fact that you need a V ends up being a chumrah for the Rambam, right? Do you follow what I'm saying? Because the Rambam's going to say, even though the reasons aren't relevant, and therefore we really shouldn't care and get meuchar, but there's a requirement, there's a halachic requirement. The rabbis came along and made the decision that we need to zman again, and the right zman again, and therefore get meuchar is not going to be a problem, even if the reasons why we needed zman in the first place are no longer relevant.
Does the Rambam require a place, or is it only once you have a place it has to be accurate?
No, so the Rambam requires a place. Yes, the Rambam requires right. Only if it's there, right? No, but again, for the Rambam you need it, midirabbanan. Again, the Rambam you need to get a zman midirabbanan.
You both have time and a place.
You need a time and a place, and if you don't have those things, again, it's harder to say this in a.
Not just you don't have them, if they're accurate. If they have them, they're inaccurate.
Inaccurate, then they're right, correct. Right. The question is, most of the Rishonim, almost all the Rishonim, disagree with the Rambam. They say, "Get meuchar." Why? Why would that be possible?
It's not right.
So here we have.
It's not fair to the woman. It's not.
Right. So here
you make the decision you're going to divorce them.
Right. So here we have a few opinions in the Rishonim as to why the Rambam is wrong. Right. The Ran, we're going to skip the Ravid for a minute. We'll come back to him. The Rambam how do I know the Rambam takes this all seriously? Because he puts get meuchar together with get muktam, right? And get shein bo zman. They're all together, right? The Ran says we get muktam. This is what we studied last week. This text should sound familiar. Get muktam the kamelan the pasul. Ika demanda amar im niset lo tetzei. Right. This is I just mentioned this a couple minutes ago, right? And if they got married, they shouldn't go. Ki get shein bo zman, which is the exact same thing. The koma dika lemecha shatam beget muktam mishum batachoto ika lemecha shtam beget shein bo zman. Okay, so one option in the Ran is that again, right, you remember the Mishnah, right? This is what opened the whole discussion, right? The Mishnah on Peifav only mentions the get she'ein bo zman and said im niseit lote, right? If they got married. What about a get muktam? Would we have the same threshold if they got married, or maybe the threshold goes up in a get muktam? Because then the Ran says v'yesh lahachmir in a get muktam v'lomer the kevin the muktam b'shtar shtarat pasul beget nami pasul. Va'afilu, this was the big chiddush in the Ran. Va'afilu niseit teitzei kol she'ein labanim. Remember, he says the get muktam is more than the get she'ein bo zman. You remember that, right? That even if they got married, right? In other words, the Rambam says if they got married, we don't make them get divorced. The Ran says even if they got married, we make them get divorced. The only time we're not going to, if there's children, right? What would the Rambam say about this? Rav Lichtenstein asked this question. He said, "What would the Ran say?" I'm sorry. About a get meuchar. Would he say it goes the same length? Right? No, it's what we basically have in the Rambam. You have the get muktam and the get she'ein bo zman are on the same track. Im niseit lo tzrichim latzeh. Right? The Ran raises the possibility that in the get muktam, because remember, right? What is the Ran's formulation? Because the get muktam is possible in shashtara. Right? In other words, the get muktam is more chamur than a get she'ein bo zman, and therefore, even if they got married, they have to get divorced. So as we take it up a notch, right? You with me? We take it up a notch. What about a get meuchar?
Standard of comparisons, other shtarot, then you wouldn't have to say it.
Right, exactly. So you wouldn't say it. Is there any reason to say it and get meuchar? Wait, let me just make sure Michael got that point. In other words, the Ran says, oh, the reason why I'm going to notch up the get mukdam is because in Shar Shtar again, a Shtar mukdam is possible. A Shtar Meuchar is not possible. So what about, right? So is there any reason to say we could wonder about what the Ran's going to say. He doesn't say about a Shtar Meuchar. The Rambam ostensibly would, doesn't have to take that point because he doesn't notch anybody up, right? But we could raise that question in the Ran. So now we'll go to the Ravid and the Rush and the Ramban. Okay, and here we'll see three different approaches towards how to view the get Meuchar. The Ravid starts off and he says as follows. Right, the Ravid says as follows: Get sheyesh alav edim ve'ein bo zman o shaya mukdam o meuchar. It's a little different than the formulation we have. You have in our Gemara. He says same thing. Okay, it's not one get, it's both. Right, either one of those. Says the Ravid. Omer Avram ta'ab meuchar. Okay, you couldn't get more explicit than that, right? That makes it fun. Shehu kasher li nasebo. You have a get meuchar, that works. What is the Rambam doing classifying these things as one? V'omer ani, says the Ravid, she'ochel et peroteha ad oto zman ve'eina gova ktubato ad oto zman shelakach ichru ukemi shehitnaima v'kol haposel get meuchar mafriz umafsid v'toeh. So first of all, he doesn't mince any words, right? In saying, right, there's those last 6 words, Michael, mean anybody who wants to apostle a get meuchar is mafriz. He's going out on a limb, and he's losing things, and he's totally mistaken. Right? That's not typical that he's going to really attack. That we find in like Hilchot Deo. You don't find that in Hilchot, in Hilchot Mamonot. That all of a sudden, so he says the Ram's totally wrong, basically. But what's his argument? What does he mean in the first half? She'ochel et perotea od oto zman.
They're still married until the date.
No. So he doesn't say that. He doesn't say that they're still married.
Because she doesn't get her ketubah though until the 2 is month.
He doesn't say they're still married. Right.
What happened?
Yafeh. So here, Dov sees he sees Seth eyes light up, right? Or what does he say? He says something totally dramatic. He seemingly says that when you write a date, if you give the get on the 9th of Adar, but the date is the 25th of Adar, you're divorced on the 9th of Adar. But you can continue. In fact, Jeff, he uses those words exactly. It's like, I made a deal with my wife. I'm willing to divorce her. You're willing to divorce me, whatever it is, doesn't make a difference, right? In other words, our divorce is going to take effect today. We're divorced today. But I can still eat the payroll until the 25th of Adar. And not only that, I'm not going to pay you the ketubah until the 25th of Adar. Remember, what's the ketubah? The ketubah is the document that says, in the case of divorce, I will pay you X amount of money, the money you brought in, and I'll double it, and I'll add a third, and whatever, right?
And can she get married between the 9th and the 25th?
Well, she can't anyway, because it's 90 days, but let's say it's 100 days. So in principle, yes, she can get married afterwards.
No, only afterwards. It's not Tofes during.
No. She can after the 90 days. No, she can get married right away.
Start the clock.
It starts the clock. She can get married after 91 days.
She can get married now on condition that she waits 90 days for it.
No. Sorry, I was not clear. A woman who gets divorced is not allowed to get married the next day.
Right, she's supposed to wait 30 days.
She has to wait 90 days to make sure she's not pregnant.
Right. Make sure
Okay, so she waits the 90 days. So we're changing the case a little, okay? The date says August 1st, and today is whatever today is, right? February 18th. So it's 6 months from now. So she can get married in 90 days. Okay. But he can continue eating her payroll until August 1st. And she doesn't get paid her ketubah until August 1st.
So the date only applies to the payroll.
Yes, exactly. Whereas, why does the Ravid want to say that? Because he says the whole point was, what do we need Zman for? To protect her, but she agreed.
But is he required to, for example, give her a mizono during this period?
No, not ostensibly not. He says it only relates to the ochel perotea. In other words, to give mizono would mean that they're actually married still. We'll see. Patience. Okay. In other words, that's the other side, but then we have to see. So here we see a very, very fascinating. So we have, again, just to make it clear, we have the Rambam Shita, right? That again, Meuchar is possible. Midrabbanan. we have the Ravid's Shita that says it's, and again, I want to use that phrase, right? The phrase they use, Omeroni shochel perotei otozman ve'ino gavek tubatah otozman shelekach ichu. The reason they did it, this is what do we call the, anansad, right? No, we're witnesses. We can basically assert or attest to the fact that kimishi naimohu. It's ki'ilu, right? Like Jeff said it. I think not you read it, but I don't know if you meant like it's like they made a condition. It was we can make any financial condition we want.
What happens?
A financial condition that
is the condition just time at the end?
Yes. Absolutely. In other words, we have an outstanding chov that allows me to manifest itself in my eating the payroll and not paying your ketubah.
But there can't be any other condition, like on the condition that you
yafeh,
clean my house.
yafeh, perfect. So it's exactly that point that the Chachmei Sfarad don't love in the Ravid, right? The Ravid's Provençal, and it's exactly that point that everybody jumps down the Ravid's throat and says it's simply not possible. Why not? Because a get has to be what? In English, no strings attached, right?
Has to be fine.
Right. It's the whole point of a get. What does the word get mean? Is right. We've severed the relationship, right? V'shilach. The Hebrew word v'shilach is different than just v'yatzah, right? V'shilach is we sent her away, right? The Ramban points out. I don't know if I mentioned this at the beginning of Gittin. Maybe I should have. I thought we mentioned it, maybe I forgot. In the first year I didn't mention this. The Ramban points out the v'shilach of get, right, is based on the v'shilach of Hagar and whatever. In other words, that you're gone, you're out of here. In other words, there's no connection.
Well, we know, but we have the midrash to each other back.
Okay, fine. So you took it back with a different name. Okay, so the rush here, again, he doesn't go after the Ravid. I don't think he goes after the Ravid as much as the Ramban does, but he does go after the Ravid. Look, or he does kind of reread the Ravid. I'm not sure that his reading of the Ravid is the simple reading of the Ravid. So let's say the rush. Now he has two readings. Okay, Va'ravad Zal. This is the rush, in the comment at the end, the commentary. Va'ravad Zal katav de Meuchar kasher legarish bo la'alter, which you can be megarisher on February 18th with a get dated August 1st. Ela sheyesh lebal peirot ad oto zman hakatuv beget. V'dvarav einam mevarim. He says, I don't get the rush, right? This is exciting stuff for me when you see it like this, right? Kevan sha'abal mitzaveh lichtov et haget. Since the husband commands to write the get, umegaresh ha'isha bal korcha, and since the husband has all these rights, he can just divorce her whenever he wants, at least on a doraisa level. Lama tafsid ha'isha perotah im ha'bal tziva la'achar zman. He says, what gives here, right? What the heck?
Why would she agree to it?
Right. Or we gave him the right to do this, right? Once he's doing it, we shouldn't allow him to extort her. That's basically what he's saying. He says, it's extortion. Yes, I'll give you the get, but I'm going to continue with the financial benefits. You could say the opposite. In theory, you could say the opposite, right? You could say the fact that the husband has all the power on a doraita level enables him to make whatever tonight he wants, and she's just stuck with it. The rush, in a kind of a liberal twist, says the very fact that he can do this prevents him from adding a condition. If he wants to be divorced, then damn it, get divorced. Yeah. Right? No conditions. Right? Again, I want to read that again because it's an interesting line in many respects. Right? He says, the kevan shabal mitzuva lichtov et haget. I think it's mitzaveh, since he commands to write the get. Umegaresh ha'isha bal korcha. Lama tafsid ha'isha perotei im ha'bal tziva la'achar zman. So he says, I'm not going to totally disagree with the Ravid. I'm just going to come up with a different svar for the Ravid. He says, V'im nichtav azman meuchar midat ha'isha. So he says, Ani mefatzel. He says, there's two different dimensions of it, right? There's two different case studies. One is if he writes the get against her will, then in fact, it doesn't work. If he writes the get with her, or what he basically does is he limits the Ravid to a particular case. You with me? Right, exactly. And then he uses a new word. Right? In other words, if the woman is sitting there and saying, what the heck are you doing? then in fact he's not allowed to say, I'm extorting you, I'm leaving it. But if he writes it and she agrees, then he uses an important word, as machla ha'isha peroteha. Right? Dan, you understand? Machla, there's mechila. Machla ha'isha peroteha.
But in a case of extortion,
Labal ad zman hakatuv beget. Baget kasher.
but in a case of extortion, how do we know if it's against her will or
No, so again, the word extortion is not a good word. I overuse that word.
in other words, if he has all the power, right? He can say to her quietly, listen, I know this isn't working out, but I'm only going to give you the get if you continue to let me eat.
Right. So I said, that's what I said. I said, once you go that line, maybe I shouldn't have used that word because then I said this, but even if you don't use my word, I think this svara could go the opposite.
Divorce after 6 months.
Michael, what I'm saying is,
I'll give you get, but only if you give me full custody of the kids. Now, only if you.
Yeah. So Michael, what I'm saying is the rush is here. I said it. I said, I think you could use the exact same svara in the opposite direction. I think there's a dimension of a chiddush here that he says, because he's doing this, he's not allowed to do that.
Right.
And you could have said, because he's doing this, he can do whatever the heck he wants. Right. So again, we have three positions yet so far on the table. Right.
I don't know if it's clear that the Ravid would disagree with that. I think he just didn't formulate it that way. But
well, that's all I got.
Yeah,
no, I don't have much more.
But it's just a question.
Well, he doesn't say machla. He doesn't. No, but no, if he doesn't say machla, he doesn't use the word mechila. If she's a party to the thing, then let him say mechila. He says it's ki'ilu hitnai malze, and he says ki'ilu ukemishin. That's like the way when ki'ilu kemishitna. Right? It's like he can make a t'nai against your will. Right? That's why the rush took it to an extreme. Right? Again, I'm obviously always interested in exploring, the different possibilities. Right? Yeah. There is, of course, a different way to explain the Ravid, that the Ravid is all in, right? And this Rav Lichtenstein was very interested in, and I think we kind of hinted to it before, but Rav Lichtenstein was very interested in this because it opened up a whole new possibility about thinking about Gittin, which we mentioned once before also earlier in the year, but I want to mention it again. It could be there's two dimensions to the get, just like there's two dimensions to Kiddushin, right? There's the interpersonal relationship, and there's the financial relationship, right? Just like we talked about when we get married, right? And it could be that's exactly what the Ravid is doing and being mefatzah b'neihem. He's saying, in other words, I don't have to go down the Rush's path and say it's only when she agrees, right? It could be that you can get, usually the two dimensions of get happen at once. I give the woman the get, there's no conditions attached, there's no financial conditions attached, and both we've severed the interpersonal relationship, and we've severed the financial relationship. Jeff remembers, I know you remember, I can see it on your eyes, you remember from Kiddushin, we said that might be the difference between Kiddushin and Nisuin, right? Erusin and Nisuin, and it might be exactly that. One establishes the legal financial relationship, one establishes the interpersonal relationship, and that's why it's also, right? And so it could be you have to undo both of those to some extent, right? So if the Ravid says that, then the Ravid's basically saying, yes, what you basically did was wrote a get for the interpersonal relationship, which kicks in on February 18th. And you also wrote a get, which relates to the financial relationship, which kicks in on August 1st. Right?
And that's okay.
That's what the Ravid says. And then you don't have to be pigeonholed like the Rush does. Right? You follow? You don't have to be pigeonholed to the Rush to say it's only like Dovi wants to say, only in a case where she agrees. Only in a case of Mechila. Right? Just right. You remember the Rush's right? You remember he says, since it's Baal Korcha, yeah, it's Baal Korcha, and this is also Baal Korcha. And that's life. Right? Because he's severing both dimensions of the relationship.
Between the Russian line, what happens about Korcha? Like,
yeah. Oh, it's what happens if she doesn't agree? According to the simple reading of the Ravid, right? No, it's the get is still a good get. According to the Rush, it's not going to be a good get. Right? You need her mechila. Yeah. Okay. And remember, according to the Rambam, none of this is good, at least on the Rabbanan level, right? Okay. So we have three positions right now. Then it could be okay. Then the Rush says something interesting. He uses a different formulation himself, which is also the formulation of Tosfot, if I remember correctly. Says the Rush in the continuation of that Rush, after he tries to explain the Ravid, says the Rush. I'm going a little slower today. Just I want to make sure, like we can all talk about this and we can all have opinions about this. So as I'm going a little slower. V'yesh lomar, says the Rosh, the Meuchar ein habal mafsid perot mishat chatima, ela mishat hazman hakatuv bo, she'eino rashay legaresh bo achshav, de'ein ze kritut. Va'afilu natan la la'altar, la'altar means immediately, ein hagerush nechalin ad shat hazman. Okay, so Dov, this was your, or someone's, or Jeff, I don't remember, one of the two of you said this exactly. What does he say? Until now, we've automatically assumed that the get kicks in, right? The Rambam, the get doesn't kick in at all. It's not a good get. The Ravid, it kicks in now, but the financial payment happens in August, right? The Rosh, assuming they agree, the get kicks in now and the financial agreement kicks in August, says the Rosh. The get kicks in August. In other words, you're not
They're inextricable. They're inextricable.
Right. Exactly. Very good. In other words, the financial dimension and the interpersonal relationship, right? That's one way to explain the Rosh, right? You can't divorce them from one from the other, right? And because of that, Kol's man that their strings attached, what do we have to do? We have to wait till those strings are severed in order to be able to do it. So the Rosh, the Rosh is second gambit, not the Ravid. You could formulate a number of different ways. You could say there aren't two dimensions to get, or you could say there are two dimensions, but they're inextricably linked. Inextricably linked? I don't know. Inextricably linked, I guess.
The nafkamina be what happens if they have yichud.
Yeah, in other words, correct. In other words, if they have, according to the Rosh and the Ravid, they're divorced. Forget about if they have yichud, Jeff. What if she sleeps with another man? Right? If she sleeps with another man, so according to the Rosh and the Ravid, she's not an adulteress, even if she's within the 90 days. Okay, whatever, we deal with that. But according to the second interpretation of the Rosh and the Tosfot, we'll see in a second, they're still married. Right. But the Rambam, they're married under the Rabbanim now, right? The Rambam, once lototzi, right? The Rambam is not going to, once she's slept, we're not going to convict her of adultery, right? In other words, that's the advantage of the Rambam, right? But again, ironically, right, what's the irony here in Jeff's question? That even though the Rambam says the get is pasal midurabanan, right? According to the Rosh, the get only kicks in later, so it's actually there's no get, no raisa, right? Do you follow that? Whereas it could be that we're going to have them, right? No, think about it. If she, in between February 18th and August 1st, if she slept with another man, according to the Rambam, she's not an adulteress, but according to the Rosh, she is. Even though the Rosh says again, Meuchar is kosher, and the Rambam says it's not kosher. Yeah. Right? It flips. It's beautiful. Right? Because, says the Rosh, right? Now you can see, by the way, why the Ravid is so obsessed about this story. Because there's really, there's people's lives online. Right? In other words, it could be that they get divorced and, certainly such a situation could play out very simply, right? The Tosfot takes a similar approach. This is when he talks about Reish Lakish, about it's Mishum Peiro, not Batachoto, as opposed to Rabbi Yochanan. So it says that Kadesh, I think we might have read this one before. Kadesh Isha Matai Nechtam Nechtam, Velotav Si Peiro Rachat Netina. Right? So the Tosfot says, why do we have a get she'ein bo zman as pasul? Because of peyrot. Remember ein bo zman? Because then he'll just continue eating peyrot. And when she pulls out the get, it's like, okay, now I'll stop eating peyrot, not until now. Right? Says Tosfot, not what we said before. He says, get Meuchar yifasal ma'haitama. He said a get Meuchar should be pasul for the same reason. Why? Because in principle, Tosfot is assuming that a get Meuchar will be divorced from today, and yet, right, from October, right, Tosfot starts off with the assumption that you're divorced from today, from the day the get was given, and yet he continues eating peyrot until the get has a date on it. So Tosfot says, get Meuchar, I assume, is kosher, but why don't we say Mishum peyrot is going to pasul it? You follow? Right, that's Tosfot's question. Repair get pashut muchach the kasher. He says, but everybody knows a get is kosher, and he gives the case over there, which is not important for us now. So just skip down to the fourth line right now. V'omeri the Meuchar. So Tosfot says it must be right. Do you understand the question? Tosfot starts off with two assumptions. But you look like you're a little confused. Tosfot starts off with two assumptions. He says if there's no zman in the get, then according to Reish Lakish, the issue is he'll just continue eating peyrot. So Tosfos says, well, if there's Zman again and it's Meuchar, he'll also just continue eating Peirot. We until now have been assuming, and that's okay. Tosfos starts off and says, that's not okay. The moment they got divorced, he has to stop eating Peirot. I don't care what it says on the get. So Tosfos says, how can it possibly be? We should have the same problem. A get Meuchar should be not kosher because not a good instrument to divorce because he will continue eating Peirot after the Zman that he's entitled to eat Peirot. That's Tosfos' assumption. Right, the fact that Tosfos starts off assuming that is very interesting. We didn't assume that at all. Right, we assumed that you can continue eating Peirot. Is anybody cold? Want me to turn on the heater? Okay. So Tosfos says, "Yomer Ri, the b'meuchar ein abal mafsid Peirot mishat chatima." Says, in fact, you don't lose the Peirot mishat chatima, ela mishat hazman. In other words, you only start losing Peirot on the 18th, on the 1st of August. The ein ra'ui legaresh bo. This again, here's a little different formulation, Jeff. Right? A get that says the 18th of the 1st of August is not ra'ui legareshbo on the 18th of February. You with me? Ein ra'ui legareshbo. Oh, Danny, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You don't have the text in front of
I'm
you.
wondering where the text was. Okay.
Sorry. Here it's right here.
No.
Right here. You see where I'm bolding?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So again, Tosfos starts off with the assumption that the get is that the get would kick in right away, and then but he's going to continue eating Peirot until August 1st. Tosfos says, how can that possibly be? So then we should possibly get, and then everybody knows the get Meuchar is kosher, except for the Rambam. So he says that again, Omer read the Meuchar ein abal mafsid Peirot mishat chatima ela mishat hazman. The ein ra'ui legaresh bo. This instrument is not appropriate to use. Afilu natnu ala altar, the get only kicks in like the rush. Here he says, if ena gerushin chalin ad hazman. Okay, so he says really, except according to Rabbi Shimon, right? Because Rabbi Shimon has some other different position in the Mishnah. But Tosfos basically, I think Tosfos is in the same camp as the rush, although he does use this formulation, right, of rush number 2, right? That basically the get kicks in only on August 1st. Right, so that's already a much more radical shita. Again, what makes the rush a little different than the Tosfot, but the Tosfot a little different than the rush. The Tosfot talks about the get as an instrument is ein ra'ui legaresh bo until August 1st. Even if you sign it and you give it to her, it only we just extend your giving it to her until August 1st somehow. I don't know how that all works.
So mechanically, that's
right. The mechanics I don't understand. The writing, the signing, and the giving over all happened on February 18th, right. But it kicks in on August 1st.
This is the reality. You put the signatures in escrow. You do all the work today.
No, but remember, in get you need to get a Natina. And at the time you gave her the get.
This is how we do it, though. And escrow happens, and everything as though it gets triggered.
I see. Okay. So that could be. Okay.
But that's what it is. They're giving a get post-dated and
right.
Escrow.
Right. So again, Tosfos uses the phrase ein ra'ui legaresh bo. But then he says, "Ve'ena gerushin chalin ad hazman." The Rosh used this phrase of sheinu. Oh, he also. I'm sorry. I take it back. I didn't notice that. The Rosh also uses ein ra'ui legaresh bo achshav. Right, but he adds the ein ze kritud. Okay, it could be the Ramban takes the most radical position. Okay. We'll compare the Ran and the Rif for a moment. The Ran says, "Get Meuchar ein mitgaresh ela mizmano shel get ve'elech. Tahavele ki'ilu hitnai ma shelo titgaresh bo ad yom ploni." Okay, so what does he do? He uses, right? In other words, he uses the Ravid's formulation, but he's like a synthesis of the Ravid and the Rush, which he uses the Rush's. He gets to the Rush's conclusion, but he uses the Ravid's formulation. Do you follow that? Whereas the Ravid's formulation is ki'ilu hitna. That's what the Ravid said, right? That's the language of the Ravid. Ki'ilu hitna. It's like you made a condition. Now we said it was ki'ilu you made a condition that you can continue eating the payroll. He's saying you made a condition that the divorce is only going to kick in, right? So you see the Ran basically combine those. Right, I thought that was just interesting. I didn't know what to make of that.
Yeah, it's a big meeting because then she's basically not divorced.
Right, she's divorced and not divorced. But again, he doesn't say
she would be liable if she's not
correct. Absolutely. But the Ramban says it most explicitly. He says that this is the strings attached, and There's nothing to do about it, right? He uses the phrase "Ef shalat tira elam mizman" again, but he says, in other words, he starts off with the negative. He says it's impossible to free her up until the time that the get says it.
Effective.
Where's the date on the get? The lo kud gita ela mizman ela mina zman va'elech. The get doesn't sever until. Now you understand why that's different than the rush? The rush says ein zekritut, right? Maybe it's the same as the ein zekritut of the rush. Maybe he says that, but he starts off with this ef sharla hatira. He says it's impossible. She's stuck in the relationship until August 1st, right? In other words, the phrase "kud gita" comes from. I just brought you the riff, which was just a more mitum tzatwe on the next page about where the phrase "kud gita" comes from. It comes from. Oh, sorry, Danny, I'm just not being good about keeping you in the loop. Right, the riff quotes this Gemara at the beginning of Gittin. What if I the woman brought in all this property, the marriage. So I write again, and I say, I'm giving you back all the property that I promised, except for this one property. I really like that property. So the Gemara says there, that's lav kud gita. In other words, you have to sever on the financial side also. You have to financial sever the whole thing. That's lav kud gita. That's what the Riff says. Like having the shear like karka kolshu, the katav hachi begita. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I take that back. Strike that from the record. The case there, I'm sorry, is the Eved case. Right? If I take an Eved, right? Remember, the get of an Eved to get out has to get a get as well, right? To get shichur. Right? The Gemara says, how do you get an Eved to get shichur? How do you do that? So the Gemara plays with the case of what if I write to the Eved and I say, I'm giving you all my nechasim, everything. So he's one of the nechasim. So then he goes free.
Okay.
What if I say, I'm giving you all my nechasim except for one property?
Oh.
Except for one property, right? So the Gemara says that doesn't work.
It doesn't work for him to be.
It doesn't work. He's not Meuchar al yedei this document. If it says I'm giving you all my property except for one, everything except for one property, right? Why? Says the Riff on the second line there, or whatever I don't know what line it is. The lav kud gitahu. That's where the phrase comes from that the Ramban used. The matnitin, the matnit ninan la, was you made a thing. They came the matninan la. That's not you made. Came the shear the Baal, the owner left some karka with him. I have, since I haven't identified which property, I just said some property. I don't know if it's.
I don't know.
It could be you.
Right. The
Could be not be.
the gonze ain't no get kritud. It has to be total, right? In total.
If he names a different piece of property, it's not him.
Right, then it could be ostensibly, but as long as it's ambiguous, it's not, because it's not kud gita, right? You see what the Ramban is, right? When the Ramban mobilizes this phrase of kud gita, this is Rav Lichenstein's point, not my point. But right, he said he's basically the simple reading. If you assume that he's basically in the Ravid's camp, right? That's one way to say it. Right? If we start off with the assumption that the Ramban is in the Ravid's camp. Right, that it's kilu hitnaimo. Well, if you make a t'nai that doesn't sever, then you're still connected. Right, that's one way to explain the Ramban. Right, the Ramban is basically in the Ravid's camp. What did the Ravid say? Right, shelakach ichru k'mi shehitnaimo ilav. Right, it's like you made a t'nai. So it's the same thing here. Right, one way to say it is, okay, the Ramban is saying, lav kud gita, you're not completely severing the relationship. The other way to say the Ramban, which is maybe more, right, which takes us back to where we were in the second explanation of the Rush, is that maybe the Ramban says that there are two dimensions to the get. There's the financial and the interpersonal, but like Danny said, they're inextricably connected. If you have mamonot, it's not that you've held back the mamonot, it's that you've held back the whole thing, because the get needs to be. The instrument of the get needs to be something that severs. And the very fact that this get has the wrong date doesn't sever at all. Right? It doesn't do anything. Again, the nafkamina in terms of the two explanations, if he's in the Ravid's camp, so then they're basically divorced. If he's not in the Ravid's camp, then they're not divorced. That's not clear in the Ramban.
It's interesting to use the proof from the Eved where you don't have the issue of personal financial.
Correct. That's good. That's a good observation. Yeah, I didn't think about that.
So have you seen Jeff's example before about the escrow?
Yeah.
So if Jeff and I he's gonna sell me his car, we sign it, put an escrow, it's okay, once the money hits my bank account, then the car.
And then the car gets jammed into by somebody else, right?
Well, no, let's just use that as an example. Can I do that with the get? In other words, can the get be the delivery of the get be conditioned upon something external?
You can make it tonight. That could happen in the future. But the problem is, what kind of stuff? That's exactly where it comes up. Some Tnaim,
More for 30 days.
right?
Court has it today.
Right, you can do
Okay.
that.
Right, but
You can't
but it's not going to be. What I'm saying is,
if it rains,
right, but let's
if
say
my father comes, if you don't make it to my father's house. Those are all cases. And
She's from the Super Bowl. Whatever.
yes,
And if it's in the,
that you can too.
no, I'm just saying is like, so if I have a date in the future,
No, you don't say that. You're saying it's from now.
no,
I will be divorced should something happen tomorrow. Should something happen, we'll
no,
be divorced from now.
But I'm trying to combine it. So let's say I have a get Meuchar, right?
Right. That's different. There I'm saying it's not that the get's going to kick in. I mean, I guess you could write in 30 days, but I dated today.
Correct.
Just in the context of the get. Here I dated the get in 30 days. That's a different sort of thing.
And I guess what I'm thinking about is that what I would be concerned about is that if there's a post-dated get, that could be some way that the husband can come back and say, I want to take it back.
Right, but again, that would depend exclusively. That's just another nafkamina between the Rush and the Ravid. The Rush, the get doesn't kick in now. They're only divorced in August, so then of course you can pull it back. The Ravid, you're already divorced. You just get to eat payroll. Right. The Ramban, the reason you're not divorced is because you continue to eat the payroll. The very fact that you continue to eat the payroll is not like the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl. That's an integral. That's right. That's inherent to the nature of the relationship. So Kol Zman, that's part of the package. You're not divorced, right? Okay. So those are the different positions. Again, what this reflects, again, whether you find it in the Ramban or you just see it in the Rush. I guess the Rush is. I'm more compelled now that I read it in the Rush itself. Right. That second thing in the Rush really suggests that the undoing of the relationship has two dimensions, and it calls man that the monetary piece is not undone. You're actually not divorced, even if that's what you wanted.
How does Krukita fit in with what I assume is the negotiations that go into every divorce? When
no, because in the end, you have to fulfill all those obligations, and then you're divorced.
Right. So they can't agree.
That's why you have to finalize all the. It's in modern Israel. You have to finalize what you call before the custody and the monetary and whatever before you give the get.
Right. I see.
Okay. Or you have to come along and say, both agreed of our own free will to put that aside, and we are freely both going into this. Right. In Israel, the way you get a divorce in Israel, again, it used to be a little differently. You used to either have to go to the Beit Din Rabbani, make a financial agreement, sign a financial agreement, and then get a get. Then there was a whole to do, and now you have to go to a Beit Mishpat and get a financial agreement. And you have to bring that to the Beit Din. The Beit Din Rabbani certifies the financial agreement. Right. There's no civil. There is no civil. The religion. There's no civil divorce then. There's just a civil. The Beit Mishpat lost its right to adjudicate financial issues unless it's done through binding arbitration. So instead, what happens is that you go to the Beit Mishpat. They certify your financial agreement. You can write one there's boilerplate, but the Beit Mishpat has to certify it. Then you go to the Beit Din Rabbani. They certify that. And then they issue the get.
Use that as leverage for the law.
So sometimes it happens, but the goal is to make it not happen. But sometimes it happens. Okay, so that's get mukdam, get meuchar, and the two pieces. How do we paskin halacha l'maisa? I didn't check the Shulchan Aruch. I don't know. I don't remember. I assume like the Rambam, but I don't remember. I assume like the Rambam, but again, the Rosh disagrees. So
it's just not a good get from the beginning.
But the truth is, I should check because in principle, if you pass like the Rambam, the Rif and the Rush, so you should paskin that it's good.
Is it more common then, also because they had the whole idea that they were writing it one day and it would take time to give it to a woman?
So that's a good question. I don't know if it was more common. It's clear that the Ravid thinks this is like more practical than me and you do. That's for sure. But I don't know. Okay, so I owe you that question. Okay, all this brings us back for just 1 minute. I'm only going to do it outside because I can't even find it in the Yorzar right now. How does all this issue of Zman relate to our biggest discussion about does a star work or does a star have its own independent life and Reish Lakish and whatever? So it says the Yorzar again, in one of these 6 columns that I couldn't find this morning, right? He says, I'll tell you how it relates. He says, if you want to claim, right, you remember you remember the ziyuf, the forged document, it was a shtar kiddushin, right? It was a shtar kiddushin, but we knew it was forged. And some people say, you still need a get, right? And we wanted to apply that to get also, because after all, the story of the get appears in Reish Lakish, right? And the star is a star is a star, and you need to get anyway. We don't care, right? As opposed to just letting the guy go free. So comes along the words everyone says, well, if you really need, if Zman is going to be enough to overcome the problem of payroad, right? In other words, remember, Reish Lakish says we need Zman, so the Baal won't continue eating the payroad. So he says, well, if you believe that a star is a star is a star, so let the guy write a star without Zman.
In order to keep it there.
In order, he says, and then what will happen? He says, I know that star is possible me to Rabbanon, right? So as long as the woman didn't get remarried, or it's let the guy, or it's if a star is a star is a star, in other words, if a star has its own life, so the guy will write a star without Zman, and that'll overcome the problem of, right, it'll still be possible me to Rabbanon, but you're going to have to tell me that, then the opposite. And what's going to happen? Right. In other words, even Zman shouldn't solve the problem. In other words, once you have a star that we know is a forgery, right? We know it doesn't meet the threshold of the rabbis, you're going to tell me it's still a good star. So let the husband write a star without a thing, and that will, right, you can just continue eating, just like, one second, let me just formulate it properly. So he said that shouldn't, the fact that you'll be able to, right, that'll be a good enough get me to Rabbanan. It won't solve the problem.
It enables him to keep eating.
It's
actually like the writing. It's as though he had, the writing.
One second. No,
time. I can keep eating payroll until you actually come tell me it's over.
Well, that you can do anyway. Because he has a star. Yeah. Whereas if you're going to tell me a star is a star is a star, in other words, it's effective, even though we know it's bad. So forget about cutting out the Zman. Just write a star without Zman. And he'll just be able to do whatever he wants, and she's divorced. He says, in other words, it creates an absurdity if you're going to claim that a star that doesn't meet the threshold of the rabbis is still a star. Whereas if you're going to take Reish Lakish totally seriously, then it ends up being totally ridiculous, because the whole point of Zman it goes right out the window. The guy can just forge a star. In his context of saying you can forge any star, he'll say you can forge a star without Zman also, and just continue eating payroad. It won't solve the problem, basically. That's his argument. So that's one of his proofs that a star can't be a star, can't be a star. Just can't be if it doesn't fit in. Okay. Anyway, that was a little anticlimactic, but that's his point. Okay. So that closes the issue of Zman. But there are a couple more points, but those are the main issues of Zman and Muktam and Meuchar. And again, it's very rich because of the Rambam's, unique position. Really, he does have a sui generis position that basically, without, right, in other words, a Muktam, a Meuchar, and Zman are all the same status. And ironically, unlike the Ran who says a Muktam is worse and a Meuchar is better, right? The Rambam puts them all in the same category, right? You understand that, Ran? Right, a Muktam is worse because I know all the stars is possible, and a Meuchar is better because it's really a good star in principle. So that makes it very, very fascinating. Okay, so next week we're going to move on to Daf Yud Chet. We'll have a new topic altogether, and thank you. Okay, great. This was a good entering into the second paragraph. We'll start with Daf Yud Chet. So I think I have to look back. I started preparing, but I haven't done enough yet. Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good week.